created in recent years is the notion about, is this a male-on-female crime? The answer is yes. This is overwhelmingly, not every single time, but it is overwhelmingly a male-on-female crime. Certainly, there are lesbian batters who are abusing their female partners. There are gay male batters who are abusing their male partners. The people who are dying are not men who are being abused by women. Now, I certainly know couples where the man is the nice guy and the woman is the not nice person. It has nothing to do with who's nice people and who's not nice people. It's not an image of the world where somehow men are bad and women are good. But it's about tyranny. And it's about the ability to create fear and intimidation. And it's about the belief that you have the right to create fear and intimidation, and that you can count on other people to back you up if you create fear and intimidation. And when you really look at all those factors, how many women are going to be able to create that kind of electrified, charged atmosphere of intimidation and degradation over a man? And yet it's that electrified, charged atmosphere of intimidation and degradation that makes domestic violence what it is. And I think it's very important to emphasize that point always in the modern world, because the abusers have been able to create all this. There's now all this, people are apologetic now about referring to this as a male-on-female crime. And we need to stop apologizing for that. That's overwhelmingly what it is. You got to call things what they are. And it's going to be important as we look at some of this media, where you get some specific messages suggesting that it's really a sort of roughly equal crime, roughly equal problem. You know, all we have to do is go through our own common sense and our own personal experiences. Ask women that you know. How many of you have ever been involved with a guy that you ended up really, really scared of? And you're going to find, actually, that almost every woman has at least one experience of that somewhere in her life. And you're going to find very few men that have any experience of having lived with someone they were really, really scared of. They may have lived with some people that none of us would like very much, but that's really different from living with someone where you have to spend a lot of your time wondering what the hell they're going to do, and you lose sleep wondering whether they might kill you, and you worry about whether your kids are going to be okay, and so forth. So, I want us to look very carefully and directly at certain questions and work our way through confusion and work our way through to clarity. And I also want to say, and you can probably already hear this some from my tone, that I don't believe in a dispassionate academic way of thinking about domestic violence. And I've done some academic writing, and I believe in that when the right place for it, but I'm saying I don't believe in that mentality. The right outlook is one of outrage about what's being done to women. And women get, now I get away with being outraged because I'm a man. Women unfortunately get slammed for being outraged about male violence. And I specialize a lot to this day in the custody arena, where women are supposed to come into court after being beaten, raped, demeaned, degraded, impoverished, having all this damage done to the quality of their life, and they're not supposed to be mad about it. And in fact, if they are mad about it, that's going to lead to the court to raise very serious questions about whether they're appropriate custodial parents for their kids. So I am going to continue, and I hope everyone will join me in continuing to speak with outrage and in supporting people's rights to be outraged, and specifically also supporting women's rights to be outraged about what abusers are doing to women and what they're doing to the quality of life for all of us. And I don't have time to go into it in detail today, but in longer presentations, I take people through what abusers are costing us in injury to women, what they're costing us in injury to children, what they're costing us in mental health damage and mental health expenses, what they're costing us in health care and how that's all adding to all our health care bills. How much of our community's money are going to law enforcement costs that abusers are the cause of, because abusers are at the root of, according to various studies, close to 30% all police calls. So consider abusers responsible for 30% of your law enforcement, including prosecution, jailing, everything budget. And on and on and on. I have a whole graph about it. So that it's our outrage should go beyond what specific abusers are doing to specific women and to specific children, but about what they're doing to our level of, to our how we're doing economically in our communities, to how safe we can feel in our communities, to how much we can trust each other, to how our court system works, to how many lies float around, because they work very, very hard to spread lies. They're at the root of a lot of the problems that we have. So, I want to talk, but before we start into looking at media influences, I want to talk a little bit about the abuser mentality, because you're going to see so much in what we see and listen as we go through these examples from media about the abuser mentality. We have an image again societally of an abuser as someone who's a really tortured, out of control individual. He's tormented. And his violence towards women is a product of his pain. And then that, of course, that view, well, I shouldn't say of course, that view lends itself very easily, though we don't notice it. That's why I don't want to say of course. But it actually lends itself very easily then to starting to look for the ways that the woman is to blame. Because if he's doing this because of how much pain he's in, well, she's probably one of the main people causing him pain, right? Anyone who's ever been in a partner relationship every time in their life can tell you that once you're in a partner relationship, one of the people that can cause you the most pain is your partner. And so if his pain is the problem, then naturally we're going to start looking at her and looking at the pain that she's causing him. So we've slipped right down the slope into victim blaming as soon as we start to get caught up in his pain as a supposed cause of his problem. What I've discovered from my years of working with abusers is that my clients didn't turn out to be in any special pain. They certainly didn't look to me like they were in any more pain than non-abusive men. I've certainly known plenty of non-abusive men who lived very painful lives for all kinds of reasons. And I had a lot of clients who were absolute top dog. I mean, everything was going great for them. They were making lots of money, they were popular, they were good looking. Everybody liked them except us. And the women who had to live with them, of course, and often their children. The abuser works this stuff, to some extent consciously, to some extent unconsciously, but it doesn't really matter. In practical terms, whether it's conscious or unconscious. The point is he works this stuff. He works getting people to feel sorry for him. He works playing himself as a very tormented individual. And once he's got you in there, he works quickly into getting you to think about her as the cause of his torment. And you'll see that again in one of the snippets that will be, one of the media selections that we'll be looking at today. So if it's not about his inner pain, what's it about? It's about his mentality. The abuser's problem is actually not very much located in his feeling world. Psychologically, and there's been some really interesting research that's been done on this, particularly by a researcher named Ed Gondoff. Psychologically, he turns out not to be very different from non-abusive men. Minor differences, but not very much. He's much more different in his values and attitudes, his mentality. Very interesting study was done that looked at boys of batterers and their process of growing up to become abusers themselves, because a lot of them grow up to become abusers of women themselves. And two different studies actually that have, well, now I've just seen a third, that have compared have looked at, well, is it the way these boys are wounded growing up that's leading them to become batterers, or is it the ways that they're indoctrinated? And all three of these studies came to the conclusion that the emotional effects didn't turn out statistically to be good explanations of why they became perpetrators. The emotional effects caused all kinds of other problems. It's not that they didn't cause serious problems, they did. But they didn't turn out to be what causes perpetration in the next generation. When they reach adulthood, it's the indoctrination. In other words, what all three of these studies have found is that boys who don't buy into the abuser's ways of thinking, who don't look down on women, who don't become really oriented towards domination, who aren't contemptuous, who aren't superior, who don't make all kinds of excuses for their violence, actually, interestingly, turn out not to have any higher rate of becoming abusers than boys who grew up in nonviolent homes. In other words, you growing up around a batterer does not increase your chance of becoming a batterer yourself, except to the extent that you take on your dad's mentality. So the problem is in his mind, not in his heart. And I'm going to give you about a 4-minute version of what's normally a 2-hour discussion, but the key points in his mentality are, first of all, he believes in his right to rule. Not necessarily on all fronts in his life, but where it comes to a partner, he believes in his right to rule. He's going to control her in all kinds of ways, usually that don't involve violence. And this is one of the points that I think is important to get, is that you don't have to use direct physical intimidation a lot. If you use it once in a while, that's enough to keep people really cautious around you. And then you can control them in all kinds of other ways. So the abuser, day-to-day life with an abuser is not usually about outright violence or outright rape. It's usually about being demeaned, being degraded, being told what you can do, being told what you can't do, having your self-confidence undermined, being made to feel stupid, and so forth. Huge percentage of my clients, and I didn't keep statistics on this, but the stories were just there over and over and over again during the years that I was working with abusers, were using the woman's workplace in one way or another as part of the venue for his abuse. And I would learn about this from the women, but sometimes my clients would be directly admitting it. Constant phone calls, calling her 5, 10, 15 times a day at work, making it very hard for her to get any work done, and also making her start to have a lot of annoyance and upset on the part of her employer, because their irritation about all these phone calls is going towards her. Showing up unexpectedly at work, so making her feel unsafe there. Injuring her in ways that were causing her to miss work. Causing her so much emotional turmoil through tearing her down that she couldn't concentrate at work and couldn't get much done. Becoming particularly difficult if she was starting to do well at work. In other words, he liked it when she was bringing in money, but he doesn't like it if her work starts to be a source of a lot of pride, or it starts to look like she's really going to advance, or it might help her be independent, because that could mean independent of him. So he gets particularly destructive in a way, the better she's doing, the more it's really starting to go somewhere. So and I can give you lots of other examples. So the workplace is so often an important aspect of how he's going after her and how he's affecting her. The abuser really sees himself as superior to his partner, and he believes that he's entitled to a relationship that works completely on his terms, and that he's entitled to impose all kinds of double standards. There's a completely different set of rules for what's okay